This is a collegial effort on behalf of 100+ business women and men who believe, as economists believe, as theologians believe, as business leaders throughout this land believe, that it's past time for the minimum wage to rise to a level that approaches the poverty levels of this nation. Right now, at $7.25 an hour, roughly 30 million women and men are earning something on the order of $15,000 a year, provided they're working full-time. So two things are being suggested by a bill called Harkin-Miller. Tom Harkin, the wonderful senator from the state of Iowa, and George Miller, the wonderful congressperson from upstate Northern California, would raise the minimum wage from $7.25 to $10.10 over time, and it would henceforth index that to inflation.
The thing that really shocked me is that when I've started talking with a lot of conservative friends of mine, prominent conservatives, people I've known for 15 or 20 years and have a good relationship with, all of the issues they raise on the other side are exactly the same issues that many liberals had traditionally been concerned about, namely the job loss question. That is the single biggest issue that conservatives have with why they, in some cases, sincerely oppose a much higher minimum wage, and the facts are entirely on the other side. Once you simply bring the facts to their mind and show that the price increases that would be necessary for a much higher minimum wage are totally insignificant, that there wouldn't be job loss, and that the result would be huge cuts in the social welfare programs right now that subsidize these low-wage industries, I think there's much more chance of a healthful dialogue and a coalition on this issue. Walmart is the largest low-wage employer in the United States. Walmart could accommodate a $12 an hour minimum wage by raising their prices 1% one time. The result would be between $100 and $150 billion of extra money each year would go into those households, those lower wage households that spend every dollar they earn. And those dollars would go back to Walmart. The dollars would go back to McDonald's. The dollars would help to revive the consumer spending that drives our economy. So we're talking about something that would be tremendously beneficial for the workers involved, obviously, with tens of millions of workers getting a large wage increase. But on the other hand, the cost to the consumer would be insignificant, while the benefits to the taxpayer, who are usually the focal point of conservative concerns, would be tremendous. Right now, the United States spends over $250 billion each year on social welfare programs for the working poor, families that work but can't afford to survive on their paychecks. Tens of billions of those dollars would be saved if the businesses were forced to pay their own workers rather than shifting the cost to the taxpayer. And that's a very strongly free market argument.
Curious about what you're hearing and what your sense is as to whether or not this federal minimum wage law is likely to pass.
I think the reason that these folks are here and the reason 100 other people are standing behind them is that we're going to make sure that law gets passed in March. Right. So they're going to do everything that they can do.
There are two organizations that are standing against it. Parts of the fast food industry and parts of the low-end retailing industry. If there's breakage with the rest of the big business community, which tends to be all for one and one for all, then it will pass. Most business people, 75+%, will take you where Ron was trying to take you, Ron, which is they believe in this outcome.
Well, one thing I'd like to add to that, which really is very ironic, as somebody like myself from a conservative background, is that the major Republican or conservative Republican response to these calls for a much higher minimum wage has been calls to increase welfare spending and use that as the solution to poverty. In other words, the earned income tax credit checks are simply the government sending checks, sending money to people because they're poor to make them somewhat less poor. That is the proposal that Marco Rubio and a lot of the point people on the Republican side are making, that the way to solve poverty is to increase welfare spending. And that is not a traditional Republican and conservative argument.
The employees of the McDonald's Corporation receive something around $1.2 billion a year in state assistance across the country, which is the point that Ron is making. That's $1.2 billion because they pay low wages that their women and men receive instead from the state in which they're employed.
Businesses classically would prefer to have somebody else cover their costs. I mean, it's a problem. No, it's a problem in any free market economy. You hire lobbyists and you try to get government subsidies. What we have is $250 billion a year in social welfare subsidies going to these corporations and these businesses. And I think it makes much more sense for the businesses to be forced to pay their own workers rather than shifting the cost to the taxpayer.
I think there's one more point to this, which is there's a lot of corporate advocacy couched as economic theory coming from the Republican Party that's really subsidies for corporations and corporate welfare. This is like an economic third rail, because if you really want to take a stand against this increase in the minimum wage, then as people learn about this issue, you're going to be exposed to actually who you're working for. And it's not your constituents, it's not the people that live in your district, it's the people that are donating to your campaign. And I don't think that people are ready to peel back that veil, so I don't think that there's going to be a lot of strong opposition here.
Just to be clear, that's Rick Schottenfeld, who is a Republican.
I did run a small business. I'm now lucky enough to call myself a philanthropist, and there's really no amount of philanthropic money that can make up for what the government should be doing. I think both Republicans and Democrats need to go back and read the preamble to the Constitution, where it says we need to provide for the general good.
Lauren Windsor with the Undercurrent, Young Turks. You mentioned that it was more of a patriotic issue, but isn't it also just on the basis of free market economics, more free market? I mean, you would have the argument of, you shouldn't set regulations, set a price floor for labor because it will cause jobs to go overseas, but don't you think that it's more free market in that you're taking all of these people off of subsidies, corporate welfare?
The role of government is not to set is to set a foundation, right? So this is a foundational issue, and we know that capitalism works best when everyone understands the rules of the road. What we've got over here right now is we've got certain sectors of the economy that are essentially privatizing profits, socializing costs, and that's not fair. It's not fair to other businesses that are not doing that, either because the cost of our labor, I'm in the technology sector, I don't have anybody on my staff down to the people that answer the phone that make less than $16 an hour, and I couldn't possibly benefit from it, and that's not the reason I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it because it's wrong.
For all of the Ayn Rand, Milton Friedman junkies of the world, is it a greater sin to institute a price floor for labor, or to enable workers to get off, or corporations rather, to get off of the government
It's
goal?
the latter, because if you look at it from, and economists have looked at this for decades, the wages of low-wage workers are artificially depressed.
If Ayn Rand was here, what she would look at was simply the comparison of Costco to Walmart. Costco, its employees receive no subsidy from the states in which it's located because its minimum wage is $12. Yet we know that half of Walmart's employees receive some form of state assistance. And that is the single comparison that an Ayn Rand or a free marketer would make, is company by company, exact same industry doing exactly the same thing, and one is subsidized by all of us and the government indirectly, and the one is not. That's not a free market.
Undercurrent under the surface makes the mainstream get so nervous. It's time for purpose, for news to serve us, not with propaganda they use to hurt